We're down to 8 teams in the Rugby World Cup, and that number will be halved again before the end of this weekend. Who's heading home before the party really gets going? Will Ireland break their quarter-final duck? And do we have to watch England win another World Cup? Welcome to the JOEpan Rugby Show, previewing every episode of the knockout stages of the Rugby World Cup, brought to you by SportsJOE in association with Air Sport. I'm Rob O'Hanrahan, and I'm joined by former Munster and Ireland hooker Jerry Flannery to dissect the first 2 pairings in the last 8 stage. First up is the big one. Ireland take on New Zealand in Tokyo as they look to win their first ever knockout game at a Rugby World Cup, taking out the reigning champions and tournament favourites in the process. Just your standard Saturday. And we'll also be looking ahead as Michael Cheika's Australia try to take down Eddie Jones' England in Oita. They'll be looking for revenge after the Wallabies dumped England out of their own tournament back in 2015. Jerry, there's only one place we can start. It's the All Blacks on Saturday. We probably wanted to avoid them, but that's what we have. Are we in good nick coming into this? It was a good win last weekend against Samoa. How do you see this one playing out?
Look, I think it's far from the ideal run into that game. If you want to win a World Cup, you're going to have to beat New Zealand at some stage. I think everyone keeps trotting that line out, which is accurate. But look, I think we responded well against Samoa. The Samoa performance was strong, and there was aspects of that if we take that and we bring that, transfer that forward into the New Zealand game, I think we're in the mix. I think it primarily comes down to our game management and our kicking game. We want to control the ball and be as structured as possible.
Okay. Now, for so long, it was a monkey that we couldn't get off our back. We couldn't beat New Zealand. Now, we've done it twice in the last 3 outings, but now we have to do something we've never done before, which is win a World Cup quarter-final, win a knockout game full stop. Why have our Irish teams struggled at that stage in every World Cup they've been in?
I suppose you could be, if you look at it and put it in context to where we are now, we've never been consistently one of the top teams when we're going into World Cups like that. We have been now coming into this World Cup. It's you're talking getting into the semi-finals. That's top 4 in the world when you're getting into it, and I don't think we've consistently been at that level in the past. Whereas we have been now, so we can expect that we have the pedigree to go through to the semi-final, albeit we're playing the best team in the world, so it's going to be very difficult for us. But I think we've what Joe and the players have done over the last 3-4 years is they've delivered a consistency, and they've it's not such a big jump now to try and go and beat a team like New Zealand.
Yeah, it's a different occasion when you play New Zealand. It's the All Blacks, the black jersey, the Haka, the sense of occasion around it. Were you ever given any advice around the Haka? We've seen Ireland, I suppose, face it down when we saw it in Soldier Field when they went into the 8. We saw them then we've seen them march it. We've seen what O'Driscoll did against the Lions, or for the Lions against New Zealand. Were you ever given any advice on how to face down the Haka?
I don't think specifically. I just, I think that one of the issues is that when you start making a big deal of the Haka, say it's your first time playing New Zealand, and this is coming from a guy who's just lost against them probably 4 or 5 times. If you make a big deal of it, then that's straight away taking your mind off the game a little bit. But one bit of advice that I did see, I'm not sure if it was told to me or if I read it, was, that it's a challenge. The Haka is a challenge, but and there's some guys there who are really intimidating looking players, but if you pick out the guy who's the least intimidating from them, and I think for me, I remember my first cap against New Zealand, I think might have been their replacement 9 for him. I think he's a guy called Jimmy Cowan, and he kind of had frosted tips in his hair, so he spent a bit of time with Peter Marks, and they just said, just keep an eye on him all the way through, and it makes it far less intimidating. So I was just thinking, this dude here is, well, they still pumped us, but I wasn't too intimidated by the Haka. But it is impressive.
There's not too many frosted tips in that New Zealand 23 that was named this morning. There's some interesting calls, like Ryan Crotty, Ben Smith out of the 23. That just shows the depth of talent that's in that New Zealand squad.
Yeah, Good Hughes Mullet has made it in at 13. I think Leonard Brown has been playing fantastically well. I think if you're looking at it, a lot of teams will pick a 12 who's basically a second first receiver. You saw England throughout up to this stage had been playing Ford and Farrell, so they had 2 distributors on the field at the same time. And I think the fact that New Zealand have Barrett and they have Mo'unga in the field at the same time, it may have said that, well, having Ryan Crotty in as a playmaker at 12 is probably not as much a priority now. So they've gone with Goodhue at 13. Leonard Brown has been arguably, the standout back for them. He's been outstanding. So they've gone with him at 12. Yeah. So I think that they're probably going to use Goodhue's physicality a little bit more there. I think Ryan Crotty's probably a bit more of an intelligent player, but Goodhue's definitely, he's very, very strong, young. He's not afraid of a big occasion like that. I think he's got real leadership skills.
Speaking of one of the press conferences, one of the New Zealand players, when asked about Johnny Sexton, said, "We want to take away his time, we want to take away his space." Do you think picking the more physical centres is, I suppose, an attempt to target Sexton a little bit, as we've seen so many teams do in the past?
Yeah, that's that. I don't think New Zealand will pick their team. They'll pick the best team for New Zealand, not the best team to mess up Ireland. They'll be focused on themselves. But I think as a result of having Mo'unga and Barrett, like I said, Crotty as a first receiver is probably not as much a priority. So now they do have two very, very big physical centres in Leonard Brown and in Goodhue, and I think that that's going to help them putting pressure on Johnny Sexton. The more they can take away time from him, the more they can affect Johnny's pass accuracy, kick accuracy, specifically his kick accuracy. If they can actually affect If Johnny's allowed to play with time, he's one of the most accurate kickers in the world, and that will drive Ireland's game. So look, I think they're going to try and shut that down for him.
Starting his first ever World Cup quarter final as well. Missed the one in 2015, came off the bench in 2011. The Irish team today, to be perfectly honest, we probably could have picked it 12 months ago. Whereas a lot of the other big teams naming their teams for this weekend have made huge changes and dropped a lot of bombshells. Is Joe playing this one too safe?
I don't think it's difficult. I think people have seen guys like Kilcoyne and Conway. They've seen their form and they've said, "Oh, these guys are pushing through." But you have to back Joe as well, and that Joe's been the best coach that we've seen in Irish rugby for I don't know how long. And he's still he's quite loyal, and the players that he's been loyal to have delivered for him. I think that if you look at it from a positive point of view, the fact that people are pushing means that there's probably a bit of pressure on Rob Kearney, a little bit of pressure on Cian Healy, on Rory Best, and those guys have been warriors for Ireland, and they need to be a warrior again for us this weekend. Competition drives performance, and that's probably where Joe is going at. There's also the side that, if Joe has been backing Rory and I don't think Rory Best places under threat, but I think that Cian Healy might have been feeling the heat a little bit from Kilcoyne. I think Rob Kearney might have been feeling the heat a little bit from Conway or Jordan Larmour. But there's a little bit of, sometimes when you make a huge change in a knockout, it can kind of almost, it can seem like maybe, why is this happening now? Is this, is there a little bit of panic in the camp? Yeah. So I think Joe is it's a very steady ship, and there's pressure on the guys who've been picked to perform now.
I suppose the only big shock team announcement I can think of in the Joe Schmidt area was when Robbie Henshaw was named at 15 against England. That was a little bit of a disaster. Now, whether we can blame that on Henshaw is a completely other story, but do you think that Joe might have got a bit of a fright from that? Do you think that might be like, he stepped outside his comfort zone and got bitten? Do you think that might have been part of it?
Well, I don't know how many options Joe had for that game at 15. And Robbie Henshaw is one of the most adaptable players that Ireland would have had. I think, it didn't go brilliantly for Robbie, but in the same way he was playing against an incredibly good England side who were they've got so many powerful ball carriers that you've got to load your front line in defence, and then they just played the ball in behind a lot, then just turning Ireland. So there was a lot of pressure on Robbie there, and he didn't have an awful lot of game minutes under his belt, particularly at 15, so it was going to be difficult. I don't know, would Joe look back in it and say, it's not like Joe had the option of having Rob ready to go and saying, I'm actually going to go with Robbie Henshaw and gamble on this one, and then say, that bit me and I've gone away from it. I think it's more just a case of these are the guys that he's backed, and it's not like it's not like a real cosy situation where all the players come in and the guys who keep getting picked by Joe are always going to get picked anyway. They're feeling under pressure because the guys below them are performing well. So now Joe's rewarded them through loyalty. Rewarded it by being loyal, but now they have to play and they have to perform.
Robbie Henshaw, of course, named at 12 this weekend. Bundee Aki has dropped out of the squad. Ireland are not appealing his 3-game ban, so his World Cup is over regardless of what happens this weekend. You had a World Cup brought to, I suppose, an abrupt conclusion back in 2011. But what was interesting was looking at interviews from O'Driscoll and Stephen Ferris this week. They talked about you presenting the jerseys to the guys before the Australia game and the effect that that had. Can Bundee Aki play a similar role? Or is that too difficult for him now to be in the squad and know he'll never get on the pitch again in this World Cup?
It's difficult to recreate something like that, and it's never manufactured. It just happens. It either happens naturally or it doesn't. I think the thing for me was I'd had a lot of injury problems, and I've been, it was a fairly tight group that went to that 2011 World Cup. A lot of us had played together for a long time, and I'd had a lot of injuries, and Rory was playing fantastically well. He was first choice, and I knew then I kind of had a feeling off the back of my injury that might be my career finished. And then when I was just asked to give the jerseys out. It wasn't that I was held in any kind of esteem. Just Declan Kidney asked me to give the jerseys out, and then it was tough for me because as I was giving them out, I was realising that possibly I mightn't play again. So it was a bit emotional for me. I don't think Bundee Aki's in the same position, unless you want to get him outside with a lemon, squeezing him into his eyes, and then try and give the jerseys up. But those things they either happen or they don't. You can't manufacture them. But look, I think Bundee seems to have been. I'm not privy to it, but he seems to be a really well respected and an integral part of the squad. So I think there'll be respect for him whatever he's doing, and I'm sure he's still contributing as much as he can, even though he can't get on the field.
Yeah. When Ireland lost that game against England and then lost against Wales in the Six Nations, and we lost against Japan earlier in the World Cup, be it on social media or word on the street, I found that there was a lot of anti-Irish sentiment when it comes to the rugby team, and that not everyone is behind us, and that there are quite a huge portion of the country who are almost happy when the Irish rugby team lose. Is that something you've come across either in your career then, or coaching, or now as a pundit, where I suppose some people just want to see this Irish team fail?
I never really. I didn't feel an awful lot of it when I played. Probably because I spent most of my career. I was living in Limerick, and there's no real class system around rugby in Limerick. I can understand that people seeing there's a bit of a class divide as you probably move towards Leinster, Dublin, and maybe in Belfast people see it as more of an upper class game, and they might take umbrage with that. But that's just life, isn't it? There's always going to be begrudgers and anything, and I think the Irish team have been incredible ambassadors for the country, and how they've gotten to world number one in their sport, how they've delivered championships, Grand Slams, how the provincial teams have been Leinster have been dominating, winning doubles and winning leagues and European Cups. And there's always going to be begrudgers there, and they're just delighted to see the team stumble and fail. But that's life, like anything. They're just losers, those people, generally. That's it, really, there. So.
Yeah. Look, there's only one place we can leave this on. Ireland play New Zealand. It's win or bust. It's win or go home. How do you see it playing out? I'm more confident after the Samoan game. My head just says, listen, it's New Zealand are going to win the game, because they've just, whilst you could say they haven't really been tested, there was a massive test for them that first game against the Box. Since then, it's been kind of more like just keeping the ball moving and running in tries in the Namibian game and the Canadian game. But I think so much has to go right for Ireland. If there's 10 things that we have to do in the field, we have to get the 10 of them right to beat New Zealand. New Zealand only need probably 2 of 10 things, and they could beat Ireland. In terms of we have to play a very structured game. We have to have our set piece must deliver. Our kicking game must be accurate. We can't afford any slip ups in D. Whereas if you compare, and our discipline has to be rock solid. Whereas if you compare with New Zealand, if their lineup doesn't function, if their scrum delivery is poor, they'll still be able to get opportunities that they can carve us up on the transitions. And I think that's probably the strength of the New Zealand team, is that without having any specific base in the game, they can just pull you apart, which is what we saw in the South African game. So look, I wasn't confident when we beat them the last time, based on how we performed in our set piece against Argentina, but the players showed massive character and turned around. Unfortunately, just being a realist, I can't see us beating them. Jerry, I don't know if I want to watch this England-Australia game on Saturday, or if I'd be more than happy to watch 80 minutes of Cheika versus Jones in the press conference, but it's the rugby that's going to take centre stage at 8:15 on Saturday morning. England have a bone to pick with Australia, and I mentioned at the top of the show. Will that play any kind of a role in how the game is going to unfold on Saturday? Will England go out and want to absolutely smash this team?
I'm sure they want to smash whoever they're going to play, because they're playing in a World Cup quarter final, and they're going to be full of confidence. And I think the stuff between Cheika and Jones is probably a lot of coaches seem to do that, to take the heat, to take the focus off their players. Eddie Jones in particular, and Michael Cheika is not so much a guy who turns the other cheek. He seems to fight his corner when someone comes out and challenges him. I think I'm really looking forward. I think it's going to be a great game. I think England are favourites, but when Australia click, they can be fantastic.
Big call from Eddie Jones. He's dropped George Ford to the bench. He's shifted Owen Farrell to 10, and he's brought Tuilagi and Slade into the midfield. George Ford, for me, has been one of the best English players of this tournament so far. He must be feeling a little bit hard done by this morning.
Yeah, no doubt. He's probably feeling stung. If I looked at it from knowing those English players, from analysing them and playing against them at times, Henry Slade gives England something that they don't have throughout their backline. He's a real footballer. So I kind of anticipated that their best side would probably include Farrell with Slade and Tuilagi. Now whether Tuilagi rocks up at 13 or 12, or whether they just interchange based on how they're going to defend. If they're defending, Tuilagi is probably stronger at 12. If they're attacking, you probably have in the wider channels, Tuilagi's so hard to stop with a little bit more space at 13. But Slade has formerly played 10 as well, so he can be that first receiver. George Ford has looked really good, but England, to be fair, have not really been challenged at all through this World Cup, and they've had their forwards have gotten such momentum that for Ben Youngs and for George Ford, that they're playing on such front football. They have so much time, and George Ford has a fantastic skill set. He's one of the best passers of the ball, one of the best kickers of the ball. I think having him out of the side is probably, he can be a little bit of a liability in defence. I think teams will target him and look to run down his channel. I don't think that Owen Farrell falls into that same category about being a liability. He's a very aggressive defender. Then having Tuilagi, but still maintaining that extra football with having Slade on the field. Now Slade hasn't. When I've looked at Slade, I wasn't sure about his knee, particularly in the USA game when he came on. His knee looked a bit off, but if they've gone for him in the quarterfinal, they must be confident.
Sticking with this idea of, I suppose, shifting your 10 around, no Foley in the Australian side. He seemed to underperform massively when they played Wales in the pool stages. Dan Carter said this week that he's finding it difficult to watch his fall from grace, and we see Leila Fano come in at 10 now. Not knowing who your 9-10 partnership is, and I suppose the inconsistency they've had throughout the summer and then into the World Cup, that has to play some kind of a role when they go out at the weekend.
It's a fair point, because the 9 and 10 are the pivotal guys. They basically steer you when you're on the field and manage the game. I think between Guinea, I think it's different. I think between Guinea and White, I think like Will Guinea would be you'd be nailed on as a start on in most international teams. I think that Nick White came in and played fantastically well during the championship, particularly in the way he sniped around the edges and played the forwards. When teams get like Australia, as I watch them, tend to play with a lot of width, so they're trying to stretch defences. So when defences stretch and try and match them for width, they can then attack with the 9 running off the rucks and attack around the edges, around those sort of pillar A, B defenders. And when those defenders get tight to tighten up to defend that's when they play to the edge, one pass out to Leila Fano or Foley. And I think that between Genia and Nick White, I think the question has been driven by performance. They've both been performing pretty well. I think Genia has shaded it now. I'm not sure the same as around the 10 position. I think Leila Fano, since he's come back from Ulster, and I think Foley have kind of been, they've both been, sort of competing for the jersey, but I don't think anyone has ever nailed it down through really strong, consistent performances. So that is a little bit of an Achilles heel for them. But look, it's knockout rugby now, and if Flannery, if he performs, then they're in the mix.
The bombshell call from Michael Cheika this morning was dropping Jordan Petaia, 19 years of age. He's never played centre in a test game. He'll start at 13 at the weekend. It's a huge call, and particularly in a quarter-final stage of a World Cup. Why didn't we see him in the pool stages? Why are we only seeing this now? And as a head coach, it takes some steel to make a call like that.
Yeah, it's a like I said. There's the difference with Petaia, and we look at this, and if we talk about like how Joe Schmidt has seemed to be consistent and not made big changes in the quarterfinal, is that there isn't a lot of visibility on what Petaia has done in the past. Yeah. So I think that Michael Cheika is going to be better. He's going to be better positioned and informed to know more about this guy than the majority of other people. He's not, like, he's only 19 years of age. Had O'Connor at 13, so O'Connor, it was like him coming back in. I don't think he'd nailed that position down. I thought he was performing well for them, but he hadn't nailed it down. So look, I think that to take the gamble and put Petaia in there is exciting. It shows that there's intent from them to play, that they're going to back their skill set. They're not going to play safe. They're going out to win the game. They're backing a 19-year-old kid at 13. And I think with Karevi beside him, I think he's, I don't know a huge amount about him because he's so young. So I know James O'Connor. I know James O'Connor is a very talented, very versatile player. And they still have him on the bench. Yeah. But I think it's going to be exciting to see Petaia out there.
Will there be a scramble then from Eddie Jones, the English management team now, with a bombshell like that? You've kind of only got 2 days to prepare now to face him in midfield. If this was you, if you're in that coaching role, are you now going back through reels and reels of footage trying to work out who he is, what he's good at, what he's bad at, and trying to pick out those holes? Will he become a focus now for the England management team?
No, I don't think they're going to, like, England will have all their homework done on all the Australian players already, and I don't think anything is going to drastically change, if anything at all is going to change, because they've picked Jordan Petaia there. I think it's just more a case of he's a little bit more of an unknown quantity because he's not got 50 tests at international rugby played. So when someone, he could be performing well at Super Rugby level, but we just haven't seen him internationally. So he's a little bit more of an unknown quantity, but you can't change your plans you can't be reactionary based on the way that the opposition have gone with their selection. So I think England they'll obviously want to test him and see. They don't want him to build into the game, because I suppose common sense would say he's probably potentially could be a little bit nervous, and they want to just probe that a little bit. Not to the point where they go off their game plan, but they will want to probe him,
Like most of the games this weekend, you'd kind of expect this one to be in the mix with 10 minutes to go. And I want to talk a little bit about Australia's game management in the final 10 minutes against Wales. They were chasing a 4-point deficit. They'd managed to come back. Wales had stretched it out to beyond the 3-point margin, so they needed a try. The way Australia managed to butcher chance after chance. Karevi was stripped twice in contact. Tamua managed to not kick the ball out from a penalty. Now, I know incredible athleticism from Tomas Williams. Curtly Beale played a monster forward pass. As a coach or as a player, like, you must be looking at those 10 minutes and saying, never again. That can't happen.
Yeah, you're correct. It's accurate, but I think that's probably been the Achilles heel of the Australian side in terms of when they have to play a structured game, when they actually just have to really control the game. That's probably where they struggle. And I think that's what we talked about, like Leali'ifano versus Foley. I don't think either of them have really put their hand up and absolutely nailed that down. So, like, there's individual errors. Karevi getting stripped isn't down to Foley, isn't down to Leali'ifano. But I think that one of the aspects of the Australian game is actually just being able to play really controlled rugby and working their way up the field. Like, I think that too often they'll rely on a running game all the time, where it's getting a little balance of a good kicking game in there as well. You don't want to, if the opposition always know you're going to run, they'll just set up to defend the run. Whereas if there's a mix between, turning them with a kicking game, and then that will open up opportunities for the run, which is their strength, but they just got to get the balance right in it. So I think the management of it is going to be an area that they have to work on. And, England are really going to test them, because England's tight five. If the game goes structured, England will really, really pressure the Australian line on the Australian scrum.
I think we can expect fireworks in this one on and off the pitch, regardless of the result. But if you had to pin your colours to the mast, which way do you see it going?
I think based on how England are going, and I think England whilst they haven't had a real test so far, they keep showing that they're adding little layers beyond just being a team that's really, really physical and has some, incredible ball carriers. I think that England are gaining momentum really well. I'm looking forward to a good game of rugby, because the Australians, that's all they can play is good rugby. But I'm not sure if they have the ballast in their pack to handle England.
Perfect, thanks Jerry. And that is all we have time for on this episode of the JOEpan Rugby Show, brought to you by SportsJOE in association with Air Sport. A reminder that both Ireland v New Zealand and England v Australia will be available live on the Air Sport package this Saturday morning. We'll be back a little later this week, looking ahead to the other two quarter-finals as Wales take on France and hosts Japan look to continue their fairy tale campaign against South Africa. We'll see you then.